or there are over 30 agencies with responsibility for spending some parts of the stimulus aid. So in addition to DOE, you got Department of Health, you got Department of Sanitation, especially with the emergency food program, and you can go agency by agency. You got Department of Social Services, Department of Homeless Services. They're responsible for hotels and a whole host of other issues. So this is where the bulk of the money is going, and the agencies are vast that are responsible for dispersing a lot of this money.
And over what period of time is this money going to be dispersed?
The next couple of years.
Okay. Oh, so it's not just the current budget; it can be spread out over at least two years.
Yes.
Okay. So what? How do you see that working with the next administration and the next city council? So we're going to have a major turnover in the city council, new mayor, obviously. How do you see that working? How is that going to?
You know, I think. Look, I think the new mayor. I think has great opportunity, because with the glass half full, we do have this unprecedented amount of stimulus money. We still have $11 billion left to spend, and there's still critical buckets where that money has to be spent. So I think the mayor, and in particular, but also the city council, has a real opportunity to sort of define and fund priorities for a post-COVID New York City. I would argue that it's not simply about spending the money. It's about making sure that the programs that are developed with that money have longevity. It's about making sure that we're investing in not just the here and now today, but what the city is going to look like and be like in the future. There's a lot of people who were frontline workers, people who suffered. My own mom passed away from COVID, and there are a lot of people who are the unsung heroes of the city who need help right now, especially with rental assistance. Mayor de Blasio created a city rental assistance program. He funded it with $328 million using the local relief funds. We know that the city spent 140 of that in FY 2021, but we haven't gotten the transparent numbers going in the future, but we're spending that money. We know that there's been a problem on a state level with rental assistance money. Governor Hochul has taken the lead to try to fix that program, and we are seeing some progress there. So the next mayor has a real opportunity not just to spend money, but also to actually create an economy that will be for everybody. And also the city council, I think, has to learn from the last council and the last mayor. You got to put money away. You cannot simply think that we're not going to have another crisis. It seems that since I've been in government, as Randy talked about, the last 30 years, I lived through as a kid, because my mom was in government back in the 70s for the fiscal crisis of the 70s. I lived through 9/11, the 2008 recession, and now we have COVID. So unfortunately, for the greatest city on earth, we have challenges not every 50 or 100 years, but every 15 to 20 years. And that's why I believe we have got to put away as much money as possible, because we don't know what's coming our way.
Okay. You mentioned transparency before, and as a good government group, we are very concerned about transparency. Are the systems in place, or what systems are in place to, so that we can be transparent about how the money is being dispersed, if it's going to the proper places, people using it wisely, and so on?
Well, that's why I raised the March 2020 emergency powers that Bill de Blasio put into place. I certainly thought that that was appropriate in the beginning, because we needed to move as quickly as possible, and we have emergency ways to do emergency procurements. But he abused the system. As things were calming down and running up the bills, he did not create transparency during the procurement process. Imagine racking up $7 billion in contracts and nobody but the mayor gets to look at that. Absolutely unacceptable. The judge agreed with me. This is not a way to run a government. People do not feel that that their tax dollars are being accounted for. And I think that's sort of the misfire of this administration, total lack of transparency. I believe that, again, the new council, the new mayor, Eric, has a real opportunity to do what I would recommend, which is go directly to the people, tell them what's going on, tell them what he's spending money on. Don't play the game of hide and seek, but be transparent. And I think he will be rewarded by the people of the city uh, with the support to make the tough decisions he's going to have to make.
And when do those emergency powers end?
I'm working on it. Right now, the judge has ruled in our favor. He's back. We still have some court issues that have to be worked on, but we're going to try to audit as much as possible. Not because I want to play gotcha with Bill de Blasio. I've already looked at some of the COVID issues, what we did well, what we didn't, but we've got to set a high standard of transparency. And I'm going to try to do as much of that as I can. But I do think the reason I went to court was knowing that my term was ending and that I'm not going to be able to do these kind of audits. But I want the next controller to have the statutory powers reaffirmed so that he can go in and do the work he's supposed to do.
Okay. You mentioned rent as part of that. So what seems to be in the press is that we have a massive rent problem and it's hurting tenants, renters, of course. It's also hurting small landlords. You mentioned that some money has been distributed, but I read it's a very low percentage, under 10% has been distributed. Wondering what's been the problem on that?
Look, I think clearly Governor Cuomo was otherwise occupied, and money that I think should have been moving quicker at a fast pace, in a fast pace, obviously was slowed and gotten to the point where we weren't meeting the distribution standards that we needed to hit. Governor Hochul has said that she is now taking that situation very serious. We are hearing good things. Money is in fact being distributed. But look, we've got people who, through no fault of their own, lost a job, hanging by a thread, taking care of children, no child care, all the challenges of being a working person. Many people who we asked to deliver our groceries were the very people who couldn't pay rent with the few dollars that they were making. So we do need to have a rent offset. We need to do it for tenants. We also have to do it for the small landlords. There's no reason why they have to be the burden. They have a mortgage to pay. And I think, again, this is going to take real leadership of the city to bring the banks, to bring the tenants, to bring the small landlords, and the dollars that will come to make sure that we can meaningfully prevent people from going through mass eviction. This is a real challenge for our people in our city. And I just want to say that the people who are not paying rent, overwhelming majority simply can't. And until we can deal with those rent arrears, there's going to be some real challenges with this, and we have to recognize that.
So it sounds like what you're saying is the money is going through a lot of different gatekeepers, if you will, federal government to the state, to some city agencies, and then to renters and landlords.
Well, yes, there are different programs. So the emergency rental assistance program is a state-run program. It's not a city-run program. And Governor Hochul seems to finally be getting this program up and running. The Cuomo administration just did not do what they were supposed to do. The mayor also has a fund. He created a city rental assistance program with hundreds of millions of dollars. That money, we know the city has spent about 144 million of that money. Again, we don't have any more information, but again, that's going to be another pool of money that we're going to help to create rental assistance. And look, long term, we're going to have to look at some of the big issues in the city, how we build affordable housing, how we make sure that working people, the middle class, can stay in the city, and how we tackle the homeless crisis. It's just absolutely unbelievable. As someone who did audits of the dangerous conditions in shelters, this is still the greatest, wealthiest city in the world with $20 billion of stimulus money. There's no reason why people have to live on the streets or in these very dangerous very dangerous shelters. It's time for real change here. And I think people who care about good government and human beings have to weigh in and say to the new generation of elected officials, this is not just a day at a press conference. We're really going to have to bring in the best and the brightest into city government to tackle some of these very tough issues.
Aside from rent relief, we know that there was other money going to the state government And is the city going to get a chunk of that as well?
Well, that money we will get our share of that money. As I mentioned, we've already received a large tranche. We still have 11 billion to go. And that's the money that we're going to need for paying people a living wage, making sure that people don't live in poverty. We have to look at health and safety. We cannot simply reopen the economy the same way we closed it. And we have to make sure that the stimulus money doesn't just last for 2 years. Look, we have to recognize that, we don't pay people enough to live on in too many of our occupations. We have to strategize about that. We have to look at the big mismatch between the skills that employers are looking for and the skills we've provided for our workers. I hope that the stimulus money will be used for a new and robust uh, workplace, a new way of workplace training. I would base it in CUNY so that we can have workforce development the likes we've never seen, because the more people have skills in IT or the new or skills in navigating the new economy, um, the better chance people are going to be able to get employed in real jobs. And once we start doing that, we keep the unemployment rate low. We give people not just a job, but a career. This is all has to be tied together now, not in one-offs, but how do we grow steadily this economy and include everybody in it?
You mentioned unemployment. So can you shed some light on the federal unemployment insurance, which I believe is running out at the end of this month? Do you know, has that been significant? Have a significant number of New Yorkers received it?
Well, people are receiving it. Again, all of this has to be fully funded. I do believe it will be, but we have a lot more work to do in that area. We have, you know, nearly everyone who has lost a job after the public health emergency was declared eligible. And that included, for the first time ever, gig and part-time contract workers. So hundreds of thousands of New York City residents benefited. And that is very critical. And that has to continue to be part of our strategies. Now, some people have blamed the enhanced unemployment insurance for labor shortages. I think that's just nonsense. We need people to also be paid a living wage in the future, so that the supplemental benefit, when you add it to so many of these low wage jobs, was simply just getting people to a minimum wage. We just got to own up to the fact that post COVID, we're going to have to adjust and think about how we can create wage increases for people who want to work, but are simply, are simply rejecting working for poverty level wages. And a lot of these jobs threaten their health and safety, and we have to do better with that. I keep thinking about the people who did the deliveries, who I saw out in the streets, the ambulance workers who picked up my mom, probably without a mask or any protective gear earlier in COVID. And, they came in and risked their lives. They were basically making almost no money. We have a better EMS contract on the way. But so many people were making so little, but doing the jobs that they loved, and they were saving our loved ones. And it's time for the city to do better by them. At the same time, create an economy that goes beyond, the Midtown Business District or Lower Manhattan, but to really continue that journey of a five-borough economy.
So if those conditions still exist, it sounds like you think that we could have this labor shortage past September 30th when the federal benefit runs out.
Well, I think it's a little hard for me, where I'm sitting, to talk about what the labor shortage would look like and where. I mean, that's a large conversation. I do think that the unemployment insurance has helped so much for people who simply lost their jobs, couldn't go out and work in the midst of a pandemic. So as people come back, as businesses come back, we'll see where the job shortages, if any, are occurring. But I do think we're going to have to tackle issues of, what are people coming back to? Not everyone's going to come back to an office, and people are going to work differently. The job of city government is to anticipate what our workforce is going to be willing to do, what our workforce can do, what the role of our business community is going to be in terms of bringing back people. And this is going to be unlike 9/11 or the 2008 recession or going back to the 70s, this is literally about a new way people are going to work through the use of technology, through the use of Zooming, as we're doing here right now. This has become so common. When I started, when I closed the controller's office in March, I was one of the first. I think I was the first agency to say we got to get people out of here. This is dangerous. And then we went to Zoom, 780 employees, $100 million budget, and a 200 billion plus pension fund, fourth largest in America. And yet we were able, through technology and innovation and safety protocols, to meet our fiduciary responsibilities. And it's a conversation that we all should be having, especially with the next generation of workers.
Okay. Do you have any data or any information on how many people actually left during the pandemic, and any what's the impact on the city revenue, that sort of thing?
I don't have, we have not yet fully crunched, the tax numbers on who left and who stayed. I think anecdotally we all know people who left, but we also know people are now coming back, and they're coming back very strong. And I think that look, New York is resilient. New York will rebound. I said to people who left for Texas and some of these places, I said, just remember, when you leave for Texas, you have to live in Texas, and you have to live in some of these other places, and you lose a lot when you're not when you leave this city. But having said that, there are people who are concerned about quality of life, worried about the garbage in the streets. We have to start making this, as Mayor, or I shouldn't say Mayor, as Eric Adams has talked about, that we do have to create quality of life incentives and give people a feeling that the city is back. And I support that. I grew up here in the 1970s. I remember when there were 2,000 murders a year. I remember getting on the 8 train and my mother saying, you got to stay in the conductor car. I said, if we had to tell people there's a conductor car today, I don't think anybody would know that. And so you don't want to go back to the 1970s. It's now time to up our game, Tony, and think about ways to bring back quality of life, make people want to come back here, be excited about New York City, open up Broadway as we're doing, theater, arts, and most importantly, getting Delta under control. All in, getting it under control. The more we inoculate, the more we vaccinate, once the 5-year-old and up vaccine comes online, I do believe the city will come back, and the next mayor and council has an opportunity to bring the city back in what I think will be a very powerful direction.
Okay. All right, Ben and Dakota, should we go to questions from the audience?
Yes, certainly.
Yes.
Okay, let me just look at what we have. Okay, this relates to the real estate tax. Do you have a sense of what the how much real estate tax has been lost as a result of business occupancy? So people have left, businesses have left, not everybody's come back. What the impact has been?
Look, I think it's been hard. I think I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there's no question that when offices aren't occupied and businesses aren't thriving, that we are losing that. Again, that is, I hope and I believe, will be temporary. I mean, as I mentioned, people will work differently from home, but now this is a question of how we bring back our businesses, get the real estate taxes paid, make sure that we use stimulus wisely. So especially the small landlords who have struggled because of lack of rent are also made whole during this process, and the tenants as well.
So Mayor de Blasio has a new plan for retiree health. I guess it's transitioning to Medicare Advantage away from the current plan, which is Medicare plus Emblem Health, Blue Cross. Apparently, there are a lot of hospitals and service providers that don't accept it. And do you have a view on that? Do you support that?
I don't have a specific view, except I am concerned about it. We have not really tackled it in the office because it's really a labor mayor issue, but I am following it. But I couldn't give you that much insight, except that you want people to have accessible coverage at a cost that everyone can afford.
Okay. All right, then this is relates to money and police. So the city is paying out millions of dollars in settlements and judgments involving police misconduct. Are there anything new steps that the city's taken, anything that the controller's office has done as far as accountability for this?
One of the things that I was able to do as controller, and it was really unprecedented, I was able to work with existing police commissioners on something called ClaimStat, which I then expanded to other agencies, which essentially tried to identify where the claims were coming from as a way of using new strategies so that we wouldn't keep paying out the same claim over and over again. So, for example, when there were legitimate police complaints and claims against the city, you would then be able to analyze, and we did, that the same complaints were coming from the same precincts, the same boroughs. And what we were able to do is work with the NYPD to give them a heads up and say, hey, look, this is what we're seeing in our claims. You have problems with policing in these areas. Let's work together to try to prevent these claims from becoming a regular process. After we did this unprecedented cooperation with the NYPD, I then expanded it, and then we started to look at claims for fallen trees and why that was happening. And we had branches falling in parks, and we were paying out millions of dollars to people who were hurt by fallen trees. Well, you know what was interesting, Tony? We saw a correlation between the fallen tree and the city council cutting the tree pruners, right? So you hire more tree pruners, you don't pay out millions of dollars on the back end because the trees aren't falling down. And we looked at this in every agency, and through my tenure as controller, don't hold me to the exact amount, but we reduced claims against the city by 15%. And we were paying out hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, mostly for things that the government could fix. So, for example, you look at playgrounds. I did audits of playgrounds in part because we were paying claims for kids getting hurt or getting, very hurt, and we just had to make the repairs on the playgrounds. And I think there's more to do in this space.
Sounds like you've built a good data analytics capability in the office. Is that the kind of thing that's dependent on the new controller to continue, or is it likely to continue on its own?
I think that in our tenure, and I say our tenure because I really want to give the credit to the people in the office. We were able to do some incredible work that had never really happened in this office. A couple of things that I'm very proud of is, we fixed the back office of the pension fund. We hired a firm to do an analysis of the challenges in the pension fund when I got elected. And there were 200 problems identified by the firm. But they said there were 14 that were emergency measures that had to be taken, or this pension fund would have been in jeopardy. We fixed all that. And then I turned my attention to the way we did our investments. And the reality is that there were 5 separate pension funds having 5 separate meetings, talking to 5 separate sets of managers, tying up resources, making it almost impossible for the Bureau of Asset Management to actually spend time thinking about our asset allocation. And Mike Bloomberg and mayors and controllers in the past wanted to consolidate into one investment fund. And I was proud to figure out a strategy working with the trustees to actually have that meeting. And I'm leaving office hitting a 9% actuarial target, not the 7 that I'm charged with, and basically doubling the pension fund. And we were able to do that in part because of our one investment meeting strategy. It's a tribute to all the labor leaders and unions that went in to do this. I will tell you, if you read the Daily News, and the police pension fund now wants to get out of the SIM, the one investment meeting, because they want to go back to the old days of lack of transparency. And even though we hit 25% this year and 9%, they're going to fight me in the last few months of office to try to get out of the Sim, but I believe that police and the police officers, the men and women who risk their lives, when they look at our returns and our reforms, I think they'll shake their heads at the PBA trustee who wants to make this happen. So I think the next controller has to stand firm and continue to do this work and bring his own fresh set of eyes and ideas, which I think is exciting. But we really broke incredible ground. Look, we hit our actual targets, but I also did a $4 billion fossil fuel divestment to try to help save the planet. And people told me that couldn't be done, and we were able to do it. And the lesson I've learned in my 30 years in government is to recognize what you don't know, and to recognize that the talent of finding the right people to do work in government is critical. If I had to give Eric Adams one piece of advice, it all comes down to the transition. Spend time bringing the best and the brightest into government, and then they will be the foundation for you to do the great things that you want to do.
Great. All right, let me ask you one last question. So what's next for you? Anything you can tell us?
You know, I don't know exactly what I don't have a specific plan as of yet. I will tell you that I'm a 61-year-old father of a 9-year-old and an 8-year-old. And so my wife has said to me, look, I know you're going to run for office again. I know it's in your blood, but we just got to do a little bit with college tuition. Is that fair? And I said, yeah, that's fair. So I got to focus on a little putting away some money for the kids. But I can tell you, I expect to be very active in politics and very active in the civic life of the city. You know, I'm a born and raised New Yorker. I've invested my entire life in this work. And I, like many of you I know who are on the call tonight, you do this not because of money or any kind of notoriety. You do this because you just love the city. You know, any organization that can interview thousands of candidates for city council and assembly and senate over the years to try to make government better. You don't do this because they're gonna your name's gonna be on Broadway. You do it because you want to make sure the right people are doing the people's business. And I've always admired Citizens Union and others. So I'm gonna be around, and I'm gonna raise the roof when I think the government's not doing well. But I also hope to make a contribution to the city to continue to do that.
Okay, great. Thank you very, very much for this, giving us this information, your insight, and so on. And thank you for your long years of service as well. And we hope to continue our relationship with you.
Well, thank you, Tony. You're a great interviewer. And again, I just want to say thank you to Randy and thank you to Betsy. People I've long been associated, and I just want to thank all of you so much. And be safe. And the city, the best days are yet to come.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Randy then.
Thank you, Tony and Scott. We have a word for it here in New York. You are a mensch, and I wish you all the best. And happy to hear that it may eventually involve you returning to